meeting to order. And it sounds like you were doing a roll call of who's on board.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and run through it one more time.
Okay.
So Rick Rogers, Patrick Johnson. Here. John Bridges.
Here.
Molly Olson. Angel Aguilar. Don Clements.
Here.
Joe Morlock.
Yeah.
Here.
Francisco Stoller. Lonnie Parrish. Lonnie, you there?
I show her there, but I don't see a microphone, so maybe she hasn't called in. I see your video.
Don Griswold.
Yeah, I'm here.
Shannon Buckmaster. And Cassandra Olvin.
I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Chair, you have your roll call. We have a quorum.
Great. Well, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. They were sent out with Doug's email the other day. I took a look at them and I didn't see any errors. I appreciated that they were much shorter, concise enough, but shorter. Does anybody have any changes or questions or comments about the minutes?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
Oh, did I hear somebody?
No, John, I was just saying no. Nope.
Okay. Well, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 13th, 2020 meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, that was Shannon Buckmaster. Can I have a second?
I'll second. This is Cassandra.
Thank you for identifying yourself. Then all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. This is Cassandra.
Aye, Molly.
Aye.
Excellent. I think that's everybody. That last one was Don Clements, I think.
Okay.
Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed to the approval of the minutes? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to our new business portion of the agenda. And are you going to give us an update on the Planning Commission and City Council updates?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So first I'll just start with Elaine and I will be doing some tag teaming as we go through this evening. So we're going to get through our new business. We've got several items and we have public comments, anything from staff, and then any items from the committee itself. Sue, you want to pull up the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Is it showing? Because I'm not seeing it on the big screen in here.
No, it just popped
Oh,
up.
there you go. Sorry.
Okay. Next slide, please, Sue. So that was what I just verbally went through, what we're going to go through tonight. So next slide, Sue. So under this new business, as the chair indicated, Elaine and I will talk about the City Council briefing, the Planning Commission. Want to go over a minor modification that we did to the boundary since your last meeting. Then we want to talk about projects. Some numbers have changed from your last meeting. We indicated that was all work in process. We've developed an administrative cost for the feasibility study. And then we'll talk about the feasibility study itself. I know Elaine has a hard stop, so we'll get done before 7. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Doug, my screen is frozen. Hang on just a sec. There we go.
All right, we need to go back one slide if
Sorry.
possible.
Back one more.
Yeah, to number 4, slide number 4. Okay, wrong way. Keep go the other direction. We'll get it figured out. One more. There we go.
Okay.
All right. So Elaine assisted me, and we did a briefing with the City Council on May 4th. And basically, we went through all of the information that you saw from your last meeting that you had. We walked through each of the particular slides. The questions really revolved around the overall impacts on taxing districts. And so Councilor Johnson is on the line tonight, so he can speak to this one. He was questioning or had some questions about foregone revenue and investments, investing in the future and infrastructure investments. Patrick, anything you want to kind of further elaborate on that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Just and I also think that in our last meeting, you guys covered that excellent with the explanation of the growth potential inside the district. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think you guys did a great job of explaining that at our last meeting.
Yes. So Chair Bridges was also there and participated in that discussion. Mayor Rogers made a comment about the investment on the city side and leveraging for these infrastructure costs in order to promote new development, which increases the tax revenue for all of the overlapping taxing districts at the end of the program, but also creates jobs within the community, which is something that's important. There were some questions about the boundary at City Council as well and how that was established. And so Elaine and I and John talked through, you know, we started with the downtown improvement plan, and then we had the riverfront master plan, went through the connections, did some expansion of the downtown area, included the Blaine Street for the conversations of that high density residential zoned area. We also talked about that alternative area that the committee had spoken about in an earlier meeting up along the railroad track is something that could be possible in the future. Really, that was, Elaine, unless you have anything else, that was the big gist of the questions that came back from the City Council.
No, I don't have anything else. I thought it was a really positive meeting. They had good questions, and I think everything was answered.
Yeah, so then we went to the Planning Commission at their meeting on May 14th, and I did this presentation on my own, but it was a recap of what we went through with the CAC and what we've gone through with the City Council. There were a couple of questions that came back from the Planning Commission. One of those was just the projections for growth and the effects of COVID-19. And as we've said before, you know, nobody actually knows the actual effects or impacts of COVID-19. We get new information on a daily basis, but we are watching that. I'm taking the particular approach is that the world will change. It will be a new normal. Employment will come back. We've seen numbers from the Oregon Employment Department that they're looking at the second quarter of 2024, getting back to the employment levels that we had back in February of 2020. Another question came up about how the boundary was chosen and selected. Again, we walked through, as we've done with the committee and with City Council, starting with the downtown plan, riverfront plan, then the two connections with River and Blaine, and then the additional area on Blaine Street. There were some further questions about how much of the mill site encompassed the riverfront area portion of this proposed urban renewal area, and that was 115 acres. Then there was another follow-up question regarding to the boundary and should it be larger. We talked that through and went through the numbers about what the statutory limitations are. But the boundary that had been identified reflected the area where we had the blight conditions that are in the feasibility study in its high-level form. Again, and where investments could occur, and that we were underneath that 25%, and there was nothing that mandated that we had to be at 25%. I would rather be a little bit lower. At least that's my personal opinion. So you can see we only had 3 questions that came back out of the Planning Commission. They understood it, I think, as much as they could, and they are fully aware that they have other touch points as we go through this evaluation process. That is all I have on that piece. So next slide. Any questions? Okay. On the district boundary itself, there was one area that I omitted. Brett Music called it to my attention, and that was up at River Street and Sheridan Street, just south of the main portion of the campus of the university. It was in our downtown plan. It was a 2-block area. And so we made the adjustment to make sure that we pulled that in. Anybody on the committee have any concerns or issues with that additional 2-block area?
Can you say where it is again? Sorry, I'm trying to look at the map. It's teensy.
Yeah, it's all the way up at the very north east corner of the downtown. It's 2 blocks at the corner of River Street and Sheridan Street.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Is that vacant?
No, it's got some university buildings on it. What we had done in the downtown plan, and we had included those costs, was the issues like we've talked about before, you know, inadequate sidewalk width, missing ADA ramps, and so forth.
Okay.
So I have a quick question about that. If that's on the university campus, how will adding sidewalks invite more investment when it's already being utilized by the university?
We've had conversations with the university about extending south towards Hancock Street. I've had conversations with the president about not knowing if it will ever truly materialize, but that area at Meridian Street and Hancock Street is more of a signature building for the university, to make people aware that the university is here rather than a big green sign, ODOT sign that says turn right. Again, Cassandra, on this, you know, these are all of that. We've got a long laundry list of projects, and I'll get to that when we get to that portion of the agenda. Doesn't mean all of these projects are going to get funded with urban renewal. There'll be a prioritization process that this committee will have to go through to identify where infrastructure would be most warranted to attract investment.
Okay, that just kind of seems like a university project, not necessarily urban renewal, but it's not that big of a deal for me to contest.
Yeah,
let me jump in here for a second. It is probably a university project, and probably the university will do it as they've done lots of other projects. But one thing that I would say is that the university has taken a more Newburgh-centric focus. They were a decade and a half ago very cloistered. Instead, they've tried to take a more community embracive approach. And I think part of that does, in fact, make students customers of our community businesses much more frequently than has occurred in the past. So to the extent that we can have our business community unified with the university, I think we're really helping the business community, I think, a lot, really.
Thank you.
I've actually even advocated a little bit. My university never served Sunday night meals, and I've suggested that the university ought to consider that, because what that did was it sent all those students out to the local businesses to eat dinner and stuff.
All right. Any other comments on that small adjustment?
Oh, just Doug, this is Molly. I know we've had conversations with them about moving some of their, like their bookstore downtown. So they really are in a position to also expand their investment outside the university property. Just a comment.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on that? If not, Sue, would you like to go to the next slide, please?
This is Elaine. I think this is my slide, and this just shows, given the change in the acreage, just an update of this chart, which still shows that we're well below the 25% threshold for both acreage and assessed value. So these numbers are updated. And if indeed the city council at some point decides to move ahead with the urban renewal plan, this could change again, because those assessed value numbers will get changed in October. So this is just the status of where we are now on that.
Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please.
Doug, this is yours.
Yeah, so this is the public infrastructure. So at your last meeting, we were in the roughly $107 million range at the upper end. We worked through the issue on the administration costs. Brett double checked all of our infrastructure costs. So in the downtown, you can see we're about 36.9 on transportation. The utility, which is the underground, is about 10.7, close to 10.8. Again, list of projects, wayfinding, connections, trolley, parking. The reason there's a range is there's some different iterations of what might occur or could occur for a parking garage on the 2nd Street lot. And so it depends upon the number of floors. And so I put together some numbers basically on 2 or 3 or 4 story parking garage. Pedestrian furniture, we went back and double checked against our downtown plan, did some other evaluation on that for the $175,000. The building facade was based upon conversations I've had with different building owners downtown, looking for some potential participation to restore those historic storefronts. And then a sub-consultant worked through the 2nd Street utility undergrounding. So I think I brought this up before, is to get the residential development that we're looking to occur along 2nd Street, we've got the overhead power lines, and we cannot get those 3 or 4 story buildings because of the power lines being in the way and needing to be undergrounded. It's really, really expensive to do it, 150-foot section at a time. So DKS put together a number for us of a little over $1.8 million to go from River Street down to Grant Street and underground those overhead lines. So that gives us a downtown project list number, just a little under 57 million on the low end and a little under 59 million on the upper end. In the riverfront area, again, we went back, double checked all of the numbers there. So the transportation system is 33.3 million. The underground utilities, 13.7. Riverfront trails, 1.8. So that came to a total of about 48.8 million. Our finance director went and did an evaluation on administration costs, and then went back. Lane and I had conversations. I did some research on other plans that have been adopted, and we went with a 10%, which is lower than some plans, a little higher than other plans, but much less than the methodology that we evaluated internally based upon a true cost. So essentially what it would mean is that the general fund is kind of backfilling to some degree the administration costs for an urban renewal program. So that again gets you to that 115.7 to 117.5 million dollar range. Again, I think it's important to note that's just a list of projects. There is an evaluation that will need to occur later about which projects might actually get included in whole or in part in an urban renewal plan. Any questions on utility cost, infrastructure cost?
The only question I had, Doug, was did I read correctly that there was, and I know it might not happen, as you mentioned, you'll prioritize projects, but for the trolley, just $100,000 to study having a trolley?
Yeah, what we're working on, what we have been working on is a group of individuals who are interested in a trolley and them forming a nonprofit, and they would actually raise the money to acquire and refurbish a trolley and to operate it. So the $100,000 that was there was just a feasibility study about, where you would have stops, what we might need to do for any type of rail improvements at First Street and Hancock Street in order for the trolley to get up to the cultural center. And then if there's any additional improvements that might be necessary to be evaluated where there's a trestle down by Ewing Young Park.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you give us a sense of what the administration cost entails, so that if we're asked by people, we can say these are the top 5 things that are involved in that number?
Yes. So what's involved? We have to do an annual audit. We have to prepare a budget every year. So there's some finance costs that are rolled into that. We're looking at maybe 5 years from now, there might be an actual staff person that would actually administer the urban renewal program on a daily basis. The council adopted a resolution that if an urban renewal plan was developed, is that the agency would repay back Fund 14, the $100,000 to do the feasibility study and the urban renewal plan and report process. So John, the biggest portion of that is actual labor, staff.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Just along that same line, and that's 10 million over 30 years.
30 years, yes.
Yeah. So that people will look at that and freak, but if you said that's X amount a year, it'd probably make more sense to them, John, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Just when we communicate.
Any other comments, observations? All right, next slide.
This is Elaine. I just put this slide in to help us frame up those project costs, because when you're looking at capacity over a 30-year time period, we did the look at the 4, 5, and 6, 7% growth scenarios, and the capacity ranged from about 28 million up to 71 million. And on the last slide, our projected costs of all of those projects was over 100 million. So the reality is the urban renewal area has capacity to produce quite a bit of money. It won't cover all of the projects that we've been talking about. If the city council reviews this and decides to proceed, as Doug alluded to, there'll be a lot of fine tuning both of where there are other potential funds for leveraging some of these projects, so that you're not spending all urban renewal money on it, but you're able to leverage it with other funds. And then probably cutting some of those projects out. So this is just letting you know that our capacity scenarios do not say that there is enough money to fund all the projects on the list for those two areas, and that if this project moves forward into planned development, there'll be quite a bit of work making these numbers match up.
And this is Doug. So in your packet, we included the updated material that Brett had put together. And so one of the questions came about other funding sources. And so to get to impart what Elaine was just talking about. And so we've identified where we think there may be other funding sources available. When you go through that list, which is on the right-hand column, you'll see a lot of developer could be contributions, but we've also identified if there were other grant opportunities, if there was anything that ODOT might be able to contribute towards some of the infrastructure costs that are identified. So if you want to dig into the report and you look a little more, you can see the other potential funding sources beyond just tax increment financing dollars. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. So I just mentioned the packet. So all of those details of those projects are there. If when you read through it between now and the next meeting, if you have any questions, definitely send me an email and we'll be prepared to answer those questions at the next meeting that we have, which we'll get to later. Next slide. So now we're going to go into the feasibility study itself. Elaine and her team spent a lot of time putting it together. We've gone through a couple of iterations. So Elaine, I'll turn it over to you.
So we weren't actually scheduled to review this until the next meeting at the end of June, but we had all the information and were able to put together this draft feasibility study. So it basically just covers the process to date, the important information, and tries to include all of the information that the City Council will need in terms of trying to decide, number one, whether to move ahead with a draft urban renewal plan, and number two, if they want to give any directions on the parameters of what that plan might be. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to look at it, and I have no idea whether you've had time to go through it yet and have any questions. We also have this slated on our agenda for our end of June meeting. So if you have some questions tonight, I'd be very happy to answer them, but also acknowledge that if you haven't had time to read it and want the ability to revisit this on the 29th, that definitely is on our agenda to look at it again at that point. So did anybody have an opportunity to read it and have any follow-up questions?
It seemed, this is Molly, Elaine, it seemed that it had a lot of the material that we've spent the last few meetings discussing.
Yes.
So not a lot of new in there other than, as Doug mentioned, the kind of update to projects.
Right. Basically, the feasibility study is just putting together all the information that we've compiled. Right. So you're absolutely right. It should be everything you've seen, and the attachments will include the documents that were transmitted out. So it's basically a compilation of all of that just says, if you wanted to do an area, you can do it and meet the boundary and the acreage and assessed value limitations, that there is blight within the area, and there are potential projects to be done, and there is tax increment revenue that can be raised over different time frames. So those were the questions that were outlined to us at the beginning from the RFP that we responded to. So we've answered all those questions in the affirmative, saying Yes, all of those can be met, and then it will be up to the city council, and I think they will look towards a recommendation from your group, this committee, on whether they should proceed or not.
Thanks.
So one of the things Elaine put together is, you know, in the world of urban renewal, there's always a lot of terms. And so we made sure that there were definition page to those technical terms. Executive summary, again, it goes through some of the tables initially on the financial forecast, impacts upon taxing districts. Elaine did the background piece, things that we've led to. We've updated because we've got a variety of meetings that you've held, briefings to city council, planning commission. So all of those touch points that we've been able to have starting clear back in October of 2018, actually. And then, as Molly said, you know, and as Elaine has repeated, is, you know, meeting the statutory limitations, those potential projects that are there, having those graphs in place, all of the tables. So again, yes, you've seen all of these tables. And then she outlined what the next steps are in the process in moving forward. And then the background information, we talked a little bit about the fact that we have an enterprise zone down in the riverfront area. We're looking at a vertical housing development zone in the downtown area. She put pieces in there about property taxes and compression and so forth. But what we did not send to you was all of the appendices that go with it. So your packet next meeting will be much larger, and it'll be basically all the material that you've seen before, but all pulled together into one document. Any questions?
I did have a chance to, this is Pat Johnson, by the way. I did have a chance to review the plan, the feasibility study, once. And I really liked the definitions in the back. I think that's going to be a huge help when we go to council, as there's still some confusion about how this all works. I also felt the only feedback I would have is that when I saw the table that had the, I think it was an assessed value table. And again, I need to go back and review it again. The only thing that gave me pause, and maybe I'm just being too cautious, is that people might see that and go, well, if the assessed value is going up, why do we need an urban renewal district? But that's the only thing that I saw in there that even remotely, you know, it would be any kind of, you know, feedback. Otherwise, it was great.
I think that's a really good question. And what the feasibility study document doesn't try to do is what all of those videos that Scott in my office and I worked on, which was saying how urban renewal works and why do why do urban renewal, and the fact that urban renewal leverages the city tax rate with the other tax rates. And so I hear what you're saying, and I will definitely look at that table and try to figure out if there's some way to put something in that helps address that point without trying to put, 20 pages of definition of renewal in the document.
Do you have a reference to those YouTube locations?
That's a good question. So Doug, if we put a reference to those YouTube locations and then do those locations stay stable? So if they go off, does then this feasibility study not be current anymore? How do you do that? I don't know for sure how that works.
Well, they're actually all posted up on YouTube. on
Yeah.
the city's YouTube page. So they're there until such point in time as we take them away or take them
Okay.
down.
They're still-
So if we wanted to list a link in the document to those YouTube videos, we can.
I think that's a great idea. We also had prepared that the 2-page document that JLA helped us with that did some of the messaging, and that will be part of, it'll be one of the appendices, but maybe we can make sure that that it is easy to find and becomes a more prominent appendix because it explained in more easy terminology, I think, the 2 pages about urban renewal. So I think it's a good idea, hearing your feedback, to try to figure out how to put that in a prominent position in the study.
How are people going to access this? Are they going to access it on the city website, or is there going to be a physical way to access it?
So actually, you can access the videos on the city's website now. If you go to the Urban Renewal page, Lacey posted that stuff up last week. We've also prepared some flyers, and I haven't talked to Molly about this, but I think she knows it's coming. We've prepared some flyers for the farmers market, and I believe she will graciously put them on their table so people can pick them up. They got a QR code, so you can just scan it with your smartphone, and it'll take you to the videos. Lacey will be pushing it out on our social media, directing people to go to the webpage and to be able to view those. If any of you have any other ideas of how to get that out to the public so that they can view them, please let me know.
You know, I was actually asking about the feasibility study.
The feasibility study is, this version of it is online. It's on the city's website, on the project page. And when we get down to the July 20th, if City Council says, yes, it's feasible to do, there will be just all of our other documents of this committee, but there'll also be a PDF of just the feasibility study. And again, we'll keep pushing it out through social media, so people, directing them to where to go find it and be able to read it.
So would it be a good idea to make that 2-page flyer the very first 2 pages of the feasibility study?
It may be, John. I think that's I was just sitting here trying to figure out where it goes and how it would work. And what I might do is talk to JLA, have a conversation with them and see what they suggest also. But I think if we put it behind, some people are going to start reading this and it becomes too technical for them and they're going to stop. So I think putting it at the beginning is a really good suggestion, because then you get that information out there. So I think that's a really good idea.
I was going to suggest the same thing, John. And people who already know it can skip through it, but others, they won't find it in the back probably.
No.
Yeah. Doug, the only comment I have is that the number of vendors for this week has jumped by 5. So if there's anybody who can come hand the flyers out for at least part of the time, that would be really a great idea.
What time?
The market goes from 4 to 8 on Wednesday. So even this is kind of not germane to everybody, but what we found is if there's someone dedicated, because those of us who work the market have to run around and keep people social distancing and monitor entrance and exits and spray hand sanitizer. We've sprayed Doug so many times. No, wait, anyway. But what happens is you get distracted and you don't get the flyers handed out. So if we can't, we can't, but it'll be more effective if we have a couple of people. You could each take an hour or something like that, and just, it's a very pleasant place to stand out there and do it. So if somebody would like to, you'd be more than welcome.
Yeah, maybe what you could do is just send an email to
Sure.
the group, and then we can respond with an hour that we can each take or whatever.
That would be great. Also, there's some awesome strawberries right now, so just saying.
Are they goods?
Oh, I don't know, but you can stand 5 feet away and smell them, and they're just delicious and ripe. It's incredible. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to getting the flyers. That's great news.
How many copies should we have, Molly?
Well, last week we had 890 people through.
Wow.
I would not suggest doing 890. People don't all take stuff, right? But I've prepared lists of open restaurants, and I've done 200 copies, and they're gone in the first hour and a half. Now, so start with 200 this week. We have it every week, so you have an opportunity to kind of fine tune as you go along.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts and suggestions?
My only thought regarding getting out to the community more is, you know, like the community discussion pages on Facebook, people sharing them to those so we can, you know, kind of get scrutinized and criticized early, and then we can kind of work through the comments of the people that are on there. A lot of people go on there and for stuff, and I don't know if there'd be an issue at all, but that's kind of one of my thoughts.
Fran, that's something I can talk with Lacey about tomorrow.
And will you put something in the city utility bills?
No, we were not planning to do that. It costs us about $500 every time we try to put a stuffer in the utility bills.
Can you not put something on the actual page of the utility bill?
I'd have to talk with finance. Those bills got a pre-format set to them, and then we have an outside vendor who processes them. So I'd have to talk to the finance director. But I will do that.
So part of what we can also do is all of the groups in the city, and probably John knows these more than I do, but there's the 2 Rotary groups, and there's Kiwanis and so on, and they all have mail lists and social media pages. And so if we could, you know, just get them to also forward out to all their people, if you think that's an audience you want to reach.
We've done that before in other projects. Yes.
Does it work? Yeah.
Well, this is Shannon Buckmaster. If I recall correctly, both Doug and Dan are actually presenting our program this week at Noon Rotary.
Oh, I am?
I thought so, and I don't know if 2 days notice is too soon for you, but that could be an opportunity.
Shannon, I think he presents this in his sleep every night, so he could probably, you know, like at a drop of a hat.
I will talk with Dan in the morning.
Fantastic. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay. All good ideas.
Doug, one last thing. If you send me all of your mails don't show the mail list, can you send me the mail list so I can send that out and get responses on help at the farmer's market?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this is Elaine again. I think as we're talking through this a little bit, I'll want to make sure that the executive summary in this is something that could actually just be taken out on its own and produced, because that may be all that most people will ever want to look at. So in terms of thinking of a document, to have the big document be one big document with all of the appendices, but then also just have a document that is the executive summary with the 2-page handout that JLA put together. So I think that will be much more user friendly if we do it that way.
All right. Anybody else have thought, idea? Hearing any? Sue, can we go to the next slide?
So unfortunately, you guys were our first effort at trying to do videos to go on somebody's website. We do these presentations all the time. So we have the PowerPoints, and then we always do different versions of those PowerPoints depending on the locality and what they're trying to do. So Scott in my office took on the task of trying to put these all together, and Doug and Lacey did a great job looking at them and trying to divide them up into sections that made sense. So we've put these together for you. Hopefully they've helped people to understand. Hopefully they will help people to understand, and that they'll be short enough that people can, you know, look at one and then decide whether they want to go to listen to another one or not. So I think a number of you have looked at them, and we've had a number of positive responses on them. So if you have other comments, that would be great.
I watched them and I thought they were really informative, and I appreciated how it kind of came from like a simplistic but still thorough way of like communicating what we're doing. And I liked how it emphasized that we are not raising everybody's property taxes like multiple times. So I thought that was useful.
Yeah, that was a great point over and over. I like that. So.
This is Shannon Buckmaster. I also watched the videos, and I was really impressed that you seem to have a very proactive effort to address concerns that will come up from our community, not just raising taxes, as Francisco mentioned, but even how this affects the school districts. I thought that was very strategic. Thank you.
This is Cassandra, and you guys did a great job.
Thank you. So one of the things that when we got the comments, we ended up doing one extra video because there still was some confusion about why is urban renewal on my property tax bill, and will I be paying some of those taxes or not? And I think some of the confusion stems from when you looked at urban renewal in Newburgh before, I think it was collected a different way. So I think what people knew before isn't what's happened since measures 5, 47, and 50. And so we did that final video. And so for those of you who looked at the first videos, if you haven't looked at the final one, you might do that. And just a 2-minute explanation is, yes, every property tax bill in Newburgh will have urban renewal if this goes forward, and everybody will pay a portion of that. So I know there was one comment that said, well, if you're not in the district, it'll be a 0 there. No, if you're not in the district, you still will be contributing to the urban renewal fund because of the way the division of taxes works. And so the last video explains that it's a 2-step process for the assessor. The first step is figuring out from those properties within the urban renewal area what the growth is and what the amount of taxes off of that growth would be. And then once the assessor has that number, and let's say it's $20,000, the assessor has to take that $20,000 and apportion it to every tax bill in the city of Newburgh. So the amount is calculated off of the growth in the urban renewal area. The actual money comes in from every single property tax payment. So there was some confusion on that. Hopefully that last video helps to explain that. And if there are further questions, let me know, and I'll try to explain it differently.
Okay. Anybody have any additional thoughts, comments on that? Then we can go to the last slide.
So the next steps, we have another meeting, June 29th. And that meeting was basically set up to review the feasibility study. So if any of you have any questions, you might let us know beforehand so that we can make sure we're ready to address those. If anything comes up to you before that meeting, we will make those couple of changes to this in terms of incorporating the JLA 2-page piece and making sure that the executive summary can be easily taken out and put into a separate package. And then the final feasibility study will end up with all of those attachments of all the work that we've done. And that will come to you in your packet before the next meeting. There won't be anything new in it. It'll be all what you've seen. So hopefully there won't be really additional questions at this point, just more an understanding of what it is we're giving to City Council and what the next steps are. Doug has another Planning Commission update July 9th, and we had scheduled a taxing districts meeting July 13th that Doug is also doing. And Doug, I don't think any invitations or anything have gone out for that, right?
Not yet. Wanted to get through this meeting first.
Yeah. And then another City Council briefing, July 6th. It was originally later in July, but the last calendar I saw had it moved up.
Well, let me explain that one, Elaine. So we're still on for July 20th.
Okay.
For our full briefing with the City Council.
Okay.
The July 6th is the council has as a goal, create and support urban renewal plan and authority. And so I have to give a presentation kind of where we're at in this process.
Okay.
And so they will get a copy of the feasibility study for that briefing I'm going to give them. But it also gives them a little bit more time to be able to sit down and read it and digest it before you and I come back to them on July 20th and give them a formal presentation.
Okay.
And what's the goal of the July 20th meeting?
We have 5 council goals, and I've been requested to give an update of where we're at on their goal number 4.
That's the July 6th meeting, I think, Doug, right?
July 6th, yeah.
On the 20th is actually the presentation to them of the feasibility study. And I don't know if at that time, Doug, you're asking them for their recommendation, or will that come later?
No, I've set it up so that we're looking for a recommendation from this committee on June 29th. Then when we get to the July 20th City Council briefing, that will be done in a work session that starts at 6 p.m. And then we will have on their business session an official request. Do they want to accept the feasibility study? And we'll do that by resolution. And if they do want to accept the feasibility study, is to direct staff to form an urban renewal agency.
So at our June 29th meeting, are we, I think of like the growth rate that we're gonna recommend. Is that something you're looking for us to conclude at the June 29th meeting?
No. If the council determines that it's feasible and they pass a resolution accepting the feasibility study, and if they direct to create an agency, the selection of the growth rate would occur as this committee discusses developing the plan and the report.
Okay, and is that also when you actually tear down the project list?
Yes.
Okay. So really the June 29th is just a approval or a recommendation to forward the feasibility study to the city council.
Yes, and with your recommendation to either a recommendation that would say, you know, accept the urban renewal feasibility study and create an agency, or your recommendation could be don't accept the feasibility study.
Okay. And does the July 20th city council meeting contain a public hearing?
No, there's not a public hearing required. It'll be a work session item for the briefing, and then it'll come back as a new business item. So the public does have the opportunity to comment on that agenda item at the city council meeting, but it's not a public hearing.
And I kind of suspect I know the answer to this, but has anybody from the public made any kind of comment on anything associated with urban renewal?
I have not received any phone calls or emails at this point.
Okay.
Doug, has anybody seen the YouTube videos? You say they've been up. Has anybody, do you know if they've been viewed, or?
I don't know. I'd have to talk with Lacey about that. I didn't see her much today.
Well, we'll let you know that at the June 29th meeting. We'll track that with Lacey and try to figure out what kind of response there's been. And then I think you'll also probably get some input from people if you're handing out things at the farmer's market. There may be people who, you know, stop and ask questions, and so that will be important information to be able to send back to us all.
John, I looked at all the videos. I viewed them all.
Good. Yeah, I have two, and I think I was part of the impetus for why there's a number 6. So.
You weren't the only one. When we got a couple of responses, it's hard to know how much to put out there, right? And at what point people just get totally overwhelmed by the information. I do think by breaking it up into different videos, you know, they can watch one and then decide whether they want to watch the other. But it's a lot of information. It's not an easy subject.
No, but I think you did a good job as well. I mean, it's simplified down enough to, I think people will be able to understand it. So
I have a question, if I may. One of the things that may happen when we hand out these pages at the market is people are going to say, well, when is there a public meeting where we can ask questions or whatever? Because we had earlier talked about trying to do something like that. I would hate for them to show up at city council with their first set of questions. Is there any thought of holding, scheduling a couple of Zoom sessions where people can dial in like we've done on other stuff?
Well, we stepped back and we looked at that because we were going to have a public open house.
Right.
And with COVID-19, that was not feasible to do. So as we shared with the committee before, we went down this video path instead to be able to get the information out, and they could view it at the leisure sitting in their living room rather than trying to go in an enclosed building space.
Right.
So the challenge between now, Friday, when we got these videos posted up, and where we get to between now and your June 29th is getting out to different organizations, the farmers market and social media, to make people aware so that we can have some feedback for you, and then keep pushing that out so that we have information when we get to city council on July 20th.
So sorry, Elaine, if somebody watches it and has a question, is there anything in the video, I'm sorry, I haven't seen them all yet, that says if you have questions, you know, call Doug at home, something like that, you know.
Every video does. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll figure it out.
Every video has my contact me. They all got my email address. And so as Anita says, why is your phone dinging at 2 o'clock in the morning? Anything else on next steps? Okay. Well, if not, Mr. Chair, we're to the public comment section of our agenda.
Which I presume there is none.
Sue, do we have any public?
No, sir, I have no public. Not
Okay.
present, and I haven't received any emails.
Okay. Then the next item is items from staff, and staff has no additional items.
Okay, well then I guess we'll go to the next step, which is items from any committee members. Anybody have anything? Okay, hearing the crickets, I'd say that there's no further comments. And I'm gonna call an adjournment of the meeting unless somebody pipes up. All right, well ahead of 7 o'clock, we're adjourned then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right,
Committee
thank you,
members,
guys.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thank
Have a
Thanks,
good
nice
day.
job, guys.
Thank you.